Welcome to Inner Light, where wisdom meets action. Today, we are joined by Mike Barefoot, a powerhouse of discipline, focus, and achievement. With decades of experience in business, staffing, and martial arts, Mike has mastered the art of turning vision into victory. From boardrooms to dojos, his mantra, plan the work, work the plan, has shaped countless success stories. Tonight, we uncover how strategy, mindset, and consistency combine to create extraordinary results. Welcome to the show, Mike. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Mike, you have lived a life built on structure and purpose. So, what first inspired your belief that success begins with a solid plan?
I would think it would be my dad. He was very regimented and dogmatic about staying the course. I don't know if you've ever heard the parable of the tortoise and the hare. You know, the hare is always going to be quicker and has more infinite talent than the tortoise, but the tortoise makes incremental steps and keeps going the path, and they accomplish things at a slower pace, but they don't get sidetracked. Where the hare has so much ability that he doesn't think he has to put work in, and the race is automatically going to be his. So I learned that it's not, you know, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon if you want to succeed. Nothing's ever linear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. And like, was there a time when you didn't plan and it taught you the importance of the hard way?
Yeah, I mean, earlier when I was growing up, I was always under, my dad was great in terms of, he would want me to excel, but he wasn't what they call today a helicopter parent or parent that stayed on top of me. As long as I made A's and B's in school, then that was fine. And I developed some bad habits, such as procrastination, or I would do homework at the last minute or do a paper the night before, and I would still get an A or a B. But then when you get to college and then eventually graduate school, I didn't really become a true student until graduate school. And then you realize that, you have to be, a really good student. Typically, I got my MBA after I got my undergraduate degree in business. And I didn't realize until I was competing against other people where the parameters were a lot tougher, meaning you had to have at least a 3.0. You couldn't, I was going at night school, so you couldn't be late for more than two classes. You could only miss one class because there were 3-hour classes at a time. You couldn't make more than two C's. And like I said, you had to maintain that certain grade point average. I learned very quickly that I wasn't a student. And that was probably the epiphany that took me over the edge and said, I've got to start pushing myself and utilizing my time because I don't necessarily have the talent to compete. I've got to work as hard or harder than people that are as talented or more talented than I am. And if I don't, then I'm not going to make it. I don't like to use the term loss or failure. I like to use the term lesson. So it was a huge lesson for me when I saw other people that knew going in they had to work hard. And the fact it wasn't coming easier or wasn't becoming easy, college was a big eye-opening experience for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that story alone shows how clarity and discipline can turn even setbacks into stepping stones.
Yes,
Mhm. And
absolutely.
yeah, and you have guided many professionals into their dream roles. So, what's the biggest mistake people make when planning their careers?
We live, I think, in an age where everything is instant gratification. We go to our phone and we're able to get more knowledge and information within a few seconds or a minute or two through Google and other search devices than we could if we picked up a hardbound book or had to go through the library or other, facets to find information. And I think whether it be through that or we're used to going through drive-through and getting things instantly, or we're used to getting degrees online. We've gotten into a culture where everything's instant gratification, and that's great in terms of the ease of use. I think it takes away from us learning to develop patience and developing a grind and developing a pattern. And like I mentioned earlier about being dogmatic and regimented, it takes away sometimes from that because, I got my master's degree and I caught with some other people that are talking about pursuing their master's degree. And when I went to school, you couldn't take certain classes and be able to get rid of them if you made certain grades on previous undergraduate classes. Now that becomes the norm. And if you made a B in a certain math, for instance, my son is getting his MBA now. He could have wiped away quantitative methods. And I think that's good and that's bad. One, it takes away, you having to take a class, but on the flip side, you're losing the experience and what you would have gained through quantitative methods because it's still vastly different than the math class that you could have used to bypass it. So I think we're losing a lot from people not going through the experience. And sometimes the journey is more, satisfying than the destination. And I think that's where we're missing things in some aspects, in some respects, because you can get to the top of the mountain, you can get to the top of Mount Everest, and you're going to be there for a few minutes and you're going to enjoy the view. But what you're probably going to remember more than anything is the climb that it took to get there and how much effort you had to put into it.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. And how can someone realign when they realize they're climbing the wrong ladder?
Uh, I always tell people that most people want to take the path of least resistance. And nothing in my life that's been worth getting or achieving has been linear. It took me X number of years to get my undergraduate degree because I had to change majors. The major that I wanted to apply or applied to was closed, and I had to go to another major and being there for a year and then switch over, and some of those credits didn't correspond, so I had to take extra classes. Um, my graduate program, I got off course because I was working a full time job, and what should have been a 2 year degree turned into 6. And my martial arts journey, it took me, where a normal program would probably take about 5 years. It took me 10. I got sidetracked with school and other things, but I still achieved what I ultimately wanted to do because I always realized, even though there were times where I had to put that option or that goal on the back burner, it was still in my mind, somewhere in the recesses of my mind. And I realized in order to be successful, I would have to come back to it. So I think a lot of times if we don't get that instant gratification that I was referring to earlier, out of sight, out of mind, we forget about it. We lose cognition of it and we don't pursue it anymore. And a lot of times you have to have multiple plans in place, and I call it spinning plates. Yeah, because if you have X number of plates spinning, if you don't keep those plates spinning, eventually they're going to start to wobble, they'll all fall down. And I don't think, I don't want people to construe or you know, misunderstand that, well, that means I should do so many things at one time because then you can become a jack of all trades and a master of none. What I'm saying is whatever you got at the forefront of your schedule or, on your plan at the moment should be your focus. And then once you get that accomplished, you go back to something else that you may have partially, gone for or driven for, and you put your full focus on that again. So a lot of it is prioritizing in the moment and figuring out what is okay, some juxtapositions, some hurdles inherently may have come to the forefront. I'm going to put that on the back burner. I'll pursue this, then I'll come back to that. Doesn't mean it's washed away. It just means that you have to learn to reprioritize and constantly, kind of galvanize what's in front of you and take that task on. And once you complete that, come back to what is still important to you.
Yeah. And it's so valuable to know that recalibration isn't failure, it's wisdom in motion.
Yes. I think, having wisdom and knowing something, but actually accomplishing and doing something are two different things. You can know something, but unless you put a plan into action and you step forward with that plan. I told someone recently that, someone had a great quote many years ago that genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. It's not the most talented or the most intelligent people that get things accomplished. It's the people with the greatest work ethics. I think you establish and develop a great idea initially. And I owned a business, a small, a staffing company for 15 plus years. We were profitable all 15 plus years we were in existence. I decided to close it and I wanted to pursue giving back like I'm doing here with you in this conversation where I could share because I placed at least 1,000 professionals in my career. And what I wanted to say and share that I shared during my professional career was, you know, if you really want something, you've got to put the effort in to get it. I used to tell people it's a job to get a job. People would think they could kind of half-heartedly look for a job and they get one. With the economy the way it is and all the things that we see where AI is taking over, it's becoming more difficult and people's jobs are getting replaced by technology and other forms of work that's replacing man-made services or human-made services. We've got to become more stealth. We've got to become more creative, more innovative in terms of how we choose to make a career, make money, find internal and external happiness. And you don't have to be the brightest, but you constantly have to be thinking. And you constantly have to be working. And you have to take those two factors together, and they have to be in constant uh, symbiotic working order together in order for things to be accomplished and make things happen that you want to have occur. And if you don't, then you're going to drop the ball and you're just going to be having more excuses than you are successes, you know, as far as why didn't things didn't work out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And as a martial artist, you embody discipline in both body and mind. So, how has martial arts philosophy shaped your approach to business and leadership?
Well, that's a great question. I played basketball for several years before I got into martial arts, and this is my 37th year of doing it. And so I've done multiple martial arts. I've done karate, I've done kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and there's different elements to every art. They all have interrelations with each other where they adapt and work well with one another. But the percentages are very low. Like if you go to a reputable school, if you have one student out of 100 students, only one typically gets their first degree black belt. If you have 10,000 students, only I think one or two students get a second degree black belt in that respective martial art. So it takes perseverance. And you have to go on with the idea that um, you know there's a lot of elements that are very similar to ballet, and I have a lot of respect for ballet because it's a very physical act. You have to stretch, you have to use a lot of the same muscle groups, you have to do a lot of the same motions and actions, but they're still different. Where ours involves contact, and sometimes people get hurt. Not sometimes it's meant to be, sometimes it's not meant to be, depending on what you're doing with that particular art. But you have to stay regimented with it if that's what you want to accomplish. And I think I take that mentality and mindset that nothing comes without cost. If you want to be successful in that genre, you've got to be willing to take some pain. And when I say pain, I'm not talking about physical pain. I'm talking about setbacks mentally, emotionally, psychologically. And when you take that mindset, not only in martial arts, but you let it expand into other realms such as business, interpersonal relationships. I think you have to experience rain in order to experience sunshine. That's how plants grow. That's how things grow. So adversity makes you better, and you have lots of adversity in martial arts. That's just inherent with it. And when you realize that there's adversity in anything, it gives you a mindset that nothing's linear. It's kind of like a stock. You may buy a stock at $12 and it may go down over the next week by a dollar and a half, but you're still up 50 cents from what you were originally. And then you go, well, I'd lost $1.50, but I still really gained 50 cents overall when I gained the $12 of the $12. And you have to realize it's going to go up, down, and what you're hoping over the long haul that you're going to be more positive than you are negative. And I think that's how you have to develop a mindset long term. That again, it's not a marathon, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And if you develop that it's a long game as opposed to a short game, and you're not going for the instant gratification, you're going to be more successful in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you see parallels between mastering a kata and mastering one's goal?
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
So, do you see parallels between mastering a kata and mastering one's goal?
Mastering, did you mean martial arts and mastering one? I do. I mean, I was taught from my primary instructor that, we have a mirror that we look at, and we have students in class, and I worked out earlier this week. And the goal that we always preach and teach in our class that my instructor, utilizes is that mirror is to make you better. You're not supposed to be looking and concentrating on the person in front of you, beside you, and behind you, using that mirror to improve yourself. And that's a great parable for life, meaning that you're using that mirror, and every day you're working out, or every day you're in the business world, or every day you're existing as an entity on this planet, and you're trying to be something. What your goal is to strive and be better than you were the day before, not comparing yourself to someone else. If they have more money than you do, or if they are more accomplished in a certain, if they're more accomplished in martial arts, that's not what it's about. It's about constant self improvement with you. And I think you should take every aspect in your life and pursue it from that perspective. Am I a better version of me today than I was yesterday? And tomorrow I want to be a better version of me than I am today. And you want to keep taking that focus, and you're not ever going to get perfection. That's not what I'm trying to, get across. What I'm trying to say is you're constantly trying to evolve, improve, and learn. Learning is one of the biggest things. That's why I always say it's not losses that you incur, it's lesson. If I had something that was a setback for me, I didn't necessarily lose. What I did was, what did I learn from that setback or that hurdle? You know, and that inherently, again, I use that term, uh, that automatically makes you uh more resistant or impermeable, to things that come up in the future. You're able to withstand it and move forward because you've already done it before, you know?
Yeah, that blend of precision and patience feels like feels like the missing ingredient in how many chase success today.
It does. Absolutely. Again, I go back because I've dealt with so many candidates. I would typically, when I would walk someone in for an interview, I would do like, meet them 15 to 20 minutes before an interview outside where they were going into interview. And I remember one of the great recommendations I got from that candidate. I was asking her if she was ready for an interview. She had not changed jobs in 7 or 8 years. She was going from one government agency to another, so she obviously had government experience. But when I asked her, "Do you have experience with this? Do you have experience for that?" They're looking for it, and she kept saying to me, "Well, I don't have this and I don't have that." And I said, "Do you want the job?" And she finally said, "That's why I'm here." And I looked at her and I said, "Well, you told me all the reasons why you shouldn't have the job, but you've not told me one reason why you should have the job. You're looking at the glass as half empty. And if you go in there with that mindset and that mentality, you just talked yourself out of that job. You've got to go in there, and even if you don't have that skill set, tell them I'm a quick study. I learn very quickly. I can, learn the technology and I can, we have an old adage in staffing that it's not the most qualified person that gets the job, it's the person that interviews the best. If you have and create a synergy with the people you're interviewing with, a lot of times the person that's the third candidate they opted to interview through us that gets picked that they really didn't think was going to be a viable candidate, but that they match up so well from a personality and chemistry standpoint, they said we can teach them the skill sets and the technologies they're missing but we thought they were a better fit with our team than the other two that were more qualified. So you always have to approach it with, this is what I bring. This is who I am. This is what I can, and let people see that you're adaptable and you're malleable and that you're, able to learn things quickly and that you're easy to get along with. And that to me is more valuable than the skill sets and whatever you're doing, whether it be technology, whether it be anything. It's if you're willing to adapt and to be a value added member of a team and can show that and to show that you're not too proud to do whatever's asked of you, that is a more valuable asset than the technology or things that you brought to the table that's initially what caught their interest.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And you've built a company from ground up.
I
What
did.
personal, yeah. So, what personal principles guided you through the uncertainty of entrepreneurship?
Um, that's another good question. I worked for 12 years for some of the largest staffing firms in the world. And uh, I've been offered management 3 different times. But I use the analogy that the horse makes more money than the jockey if you're horse racing. And I was the horse in terms of bringing in revenue for the companies I work for. But they wanted me to take a small stipend, an office, a business card. But then they wanted me to do one-on-ones with the staff that would take as much as 2 hours, and you have 8 or 9 people working for you that monthly. They wanted me to do weekly Excel spreadsheets, weekly conference calls with other general managers within a region, with my executive vice president, entertain my executive vice president once every 5 or 6 weeks, do all those things and other tasks too. And then, what was going to suffer because there's only so many hours in a day was my personal productivity, which helped bring revenue into the office. So finally, my EVP, my executive vice president, said, "You don't really care about a job title, do you?" I said, "No, I really want to make money." And so I figured out that if you had, and I have pretty big hands, if I had my hand open, I was getting a certain amount of sand, which, from an analogy standpoint, the sand equates to money that was staying in my hand. But money that was coming in, a lot of it was sifting through my fingers because, that was going back to the company. Where if I owned my own entity, meaning a company, all the money was coming into my hands. Plus, you get to have more autonomy over decision making, and I do get to be the boss then, but I get all the money that goes with it as well. And I started off, you start off very from a granular standpoint. I started off working out of our bonus room, and then I graduated to a small office that was 800 square feet. And then moved to a 2,000 plus square foot building that I now own and have equity in. And I was able to pay less on a mortgage than I was paying for 800 square foot office space. And now it's worth multiple times what I originally paid for it 12 years ago this month. And that, so you're making money and decisions, having control and autonomy from a lot of different perspectives that you didn't have before. So I was, gradually, you know, scaling up, as we became more successful, as we did better financially. I went from a bonus room to an office to my own building. And then when I decided to go out of, and get out of the staffing industry after, 25 plus years, I opted to start wanting to give back like I'm doing with you and talking about how to be more entrepreneurial, how to get the job that you really want, how to achieve things and have balance in your life, both personally and professionally, because I've dealt in those areas where I've dealt with thousands of candidates. I've dealt with thousands of managers. I've made millions of calls. And I just thought, well, why not take those skill sets and apply them? And that's where I did that from my own business perspective, and I'm trying to do that now with people like you.
Yeah, that's amazing. And also, that resilience is what separates ambition from achievement, like staying centered while the world shifts.
Exactly. I think a lot of people, they love the grandiose plan of being successful. But, the statistics, I don't know if you know the statistics about opening a company or opening a business. Whether it's a small company or a mid-sized company or a large company, only 10% are still in business after 5 years. We were open over 3 times that amount. We're profitable every year, and we, and it was a lot of times we went through COVID, and we had to accept the challenges that went with that, with working remotely, and that presented a lot of issues, but we worked through that, and we persisted. And I think that's one of the biggest things you can take is you've gotta be persistent and resilient, and you gotta have I don't quit mentality, whether it be anything you're trying to achieve or accomplish. And if you don't have that, then you really shouldn't pursue entrepreneurial efforts. I would be honest with people like that. And not everybody's built for it. My dad was a great inspiration to me, but he wanted to work for someone and know that he had a guaranteed paycheck coming in every week. When you work for yourself, you have to go out and literally hunt it, catch it, kill it, skin it, cook it, and then you get to eat it. So there's a lot of parts to the process, and that's not a guarantee. Some days you go away hunting and you don't get anything at all, but you have to go in with the mindset that I'm going to come with the same intensity, the same, whatever that it takes to get it done, regardless of what the circumstances are. And you've got to be hungry every day. And some people don't have that hunger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. So, what a masterclass in focus and follow through. Mike Barefoot reminds us that success isn't luck, it is the result of clarity, commitment, and consistency. So, wherever you are on your journey, plan your path, trust the process, and show up for yourself every single day. That's where the real victory begins.